Ladies and gentlemen, in a world that never stops talking, where the hum of machines, the ping of notifications, and the chatter of constant information dominate our daily lives, silence has become an endangered experience. Yet, within this stillness lies a profound treasure, one that too many overlook. That treasure is the joy of silence. Silence is often misunderstood in modern society. Many people view it as a void, an absence of sound, meaning, or interaction. This perception stems from a culture that values constant activity, verbal expression, and external validation. In such a world, quietness can seem awkward, unsettling, or even threatening. However, this view misses the true essence of silence. Silence is not a hollow space. Rather, it is a container full of potential, a reservoir of depth waiting to be explored. It holds within it the capacity for restoration, realization, and awareness. When we begin to look at silence through a new lens, we uncover its richness and understand that it is far more than a passive state. In silence, there is a certain weight, a presence that speaks louder than words. It is in those quiet moments that our senses sharpen, and we begin to notice the subtle details that often go unnoticed in the chaos of sound. The rustling of leaves, the rhythm of our own breathing, the unspoken energy of a shared glance, all become more pronounced in silence. This heightened awareness connects us to the world around us in a more intimate and profound way. The fullness of silence comes from this amplified sensitivity, from the depth of perception that only arises when the external noise is quieted. Moreover, silence allows our internal world to emerge. In noise, we are often reacting, responding to emails, conversations, notifications, and demands. But in silence, we begin to reflect rather than react. Our thoughts gain structure, our emotions find space to breathe, and our consciousness expands. We start to access the layers of ourselves that are buried under the constant noise. These layers include our hopes, fears, desires, and dreams. Silence becomes a mirror in which we can see ourselves clearly, not as others perceive us, but as we truly are. This self-revelation is one of the greatest gifts that silence offers. Philosophically and spiritually, many traditions have long held silence in high regard. In Buddhism, silence is a tool for mindfulness. In Christianity, it is a space for divine communication. In Sufism, it is a path to inner stillness and union. All these teachings point to the same truth, that silence is not lifeless or dull, but full of insight, wisdom, and presence. It is in silence that the soul often speaks most clearly. This idea is not limited to religious experience. Artists, poets, and scientists too find that their most inspired moments often come during periods of solitude and silence. The creative spark ignites more easily when the mind is calm and undistracted. On a psychological level, silence has been shown to promote mental clarity and emotional stability. Research indicates that quiet environments can reduce stress levels, lower blood pressure, and improve concentration. This scientific validation reinforces what many have intuitively known, that silence nourishes the mind and the body. Unlike noise, which can scatter our attention and create mental clutter, silence brings order to our thoughts. It helps us process experiences, solve problems, and access inner calm. The fullness of silence lies in its ability to heal and strengthen us from within. Therefore, To truly grasp the richness of silence, we must shift our mindset. Instead of viewing it as a lack of something, we must recognize it as a space brimming with meaning. It is a pause filled with potential, a gap that invites insight, a stillness that allows transformation. Silence is not a break from life. It is a deeper experience of life. It teaches us that we do not need constant sound to feel alive. In fact, it is often in the quiet moments that we feel the most present, the most real, and the most connected to the essence of our being. In the modern world, our minds are constantly bombarded by distractions. Phones vibrating with notifications, television streaming non-stop content, conversations overlapping, and advertisements calling for attention at every turn. Amidst all this mental clutter, our thoughts often become jumbled, confused, and difficult to process. Silence offers a powerful antidote to this chaos. When we remove ourselves from the external noise, we allow our mental fog to lift. Like still water becoming clear once the waves settle, our minds become transparent when allowed to rest in silence. This clarity is not forced. It emerges naturally when we step back from the turbulence of everyday life. Silence gives us a chance to organize our thoughts. Often, we are not even aware of how many conflicting emotions or unresolved ideas we carry until we step into a quiet space. Once the noise subsides, our mind begins to sift through the clutter, prioritizing what matters, and the voice that was drowned out by outside influence becomes audible again. This is our intuition, our reason, our inner guide, an essential part of ourselves that requires silence to be heard. When clarity emerges, decision-seeking becomes easier. Many people struggle to make choices because they are overwhelmed by noise and conflicting opinions. Silence enables us to strip away external pressures and listen to our own instincts. Whether it's deciding on a career path, resolving a relationship conflict, or simply planning the day ahead, silence gives us the mental space to weigh our options without distraction. It brings our attention to the present moment and helps us respond thoughtfully rather than react impulsively. In this way, silence acts as a compass, gently pointing us toward what feels right, authentic, and aligned with our deeper values. Silence also deepens our emotional intelligence. In the absence of noise, we become more attuned to our own feelings. We can identify emotions that were previously masked or misunderstood. Sadness disguised as anger, anxiety hidden behind irritation, or happiness overlooked due to haste. By sitting quietly with these feelings, we can understand their roots and respond to them with compassion. This level of awareness is difficult to achieve when our attention is scattered. Silence, therefore, is not just a tool for intellectual clarity, but also a gateway to emotional healing and maturity. Additionally, silence fosters creativity. When the mind is not occupied with reacting to constant stimuli, it has the space to wonder, to imagine, to dream. Some of the most brilliant ideas in history were born not from noise, but from quiet contemplation. Artists, inventors, writers, and thinkers often retreat into silence to access their deepest well of creativity. In silence, new connections are made, Fresh perspectives are discovered and inspiration flows freely. The mind becomes like a clear sky, open and vast, where ideas can fly without limitation. Ultimately, silence is essential for cultivating a deeper awareness of ourselves and the world around us. It strips away the superficial and exposes the essential. In its stillness, we find focus. In its calm, we find perspective. And through its quiet, we access a wisdom that is often drowned out in the clamor of life. Inner clarity, then, is not just a byproduct of silence, it is one of its greatest gifts, allowing us to live more consciously, more authentically, and more meaningfully. For many people, silence is uncomfortable. They avoid it, feel it, and sometimes even fear it. The idea of sitting quietly with one's own thoughts without external stimulation can be unsettling. This fear is not irrational, it stems from our conditioning. We live in a culture where being busy is equated with being successful, where constant communication is seen as connection, and where noise has become the default backdrop of existence. In this environment, silence is often interpreted as a sign of loneliness, boredom, or failure. People rush to turn on music, check their phones, or start talking, not always because they want to, but because silence feels unfamiliar. However, this fear of silence is deeply misplaced. Silence is not something to be afraid of. It is something to be embraced. The discomfort we feel in silence is often the mind's resistance to slowing down. It's not the silence that is frightening. It is what we might discover in it. When we are silent, we are confronted with our own thoughts, our unresolved feelings, and our true selves without distraction. This can be intimidating, especially if we have spent years avoiding inner confrontation. But this confrontation is exactly what we need to grow, to heal, and to move forward. Silence reveals truths that are hidden beneath the surface. In everyday noise, we can suppress emotions, ignore signs of stress, or deny dissatisfaction. But in silence, there is no escape. The truth begins to surface, sometimes slowly, sometimes suddenly. This is why silence feels intense. It acts like a mirror that reflects not just our surface image, but our innermost reality. And while that reality may be difficult to face, doing so is the first step toward transformation. In this sense, silence is not our enemy. It is a guide that leads us to deeper understanding and self-acceptance. The fear of silence also comes from a misunderstanding of what it represents. Silence is often seen as emptiness, as a lack of engagement, but in reality, silence is deeply engaging. It invites us to be present with ourselves and our surroundings in a way that noise does not. In silence, we can truly listen, not just to others, but to the world. We can hear the subtle beauty of life, the rhythm of nature, the inner dialogue of our consciousness. Far from being passive, silence is active in its ability to deepen our experience of life. Overcoming the fear of silence requires practice. Like any unfamiliar terrain, it becomes less intimidating the more we explore it. Starting with short periods of intentional silence, like a walk without earbuds, a few minutes of morning reflection, or simply sitting quietly with one's thoughts, can open the door to comfort. Over time, what once felt awkward becomes natural. We begin to look forward to these moments, to treasure them as vital parts of our day. The stillness that once caused anxiety begins to feel like home. Embracing silence ultimately means embracing ourselves. It means recognizing that we are enough without constant stimulation. without the need to be entertained or distracted. It means acknowledging that our thoughts, our presence, and our being have value even in stillness. Once we let go of the fear, we discover that silence is not a void. It is a sanctuary, a place of depth, of truth, and of quiet joy that waits patiently for us to return. In a world dominated by urgency, deadlines, and constant communication, moments of silence are often rare and undervalued. Yet these moments, brief as they may be, possess a sacred quality that nourishes the soul in ways that words and actions often cannot. The early morning hush before the world awakens, the quiet pause during a walk in the woods, or the deep stillness found during meditation, all these are instances where silence envelops us in its embrace. These are not simply breaks from routine, they are secret intervals where time slows down and we return to a more natural rhythm of being. Within these silent spaces, we become present, grounded, and alive to the subtle wonders of existence. Consider the serenity of nature in a forest where the only sounds are the rustling of leaves or the distant call of a bird. One feels an indescribable connection to something larger than oneself. This natural silence is not oppressive. Silence in nature teaches us that stillness is not the absence of life, but its purest form. In these moments, we are reminded of our place in the grand tapestry of the universe. Silence also plays a sacred role in spiritual and religious practices around the world. Whether it is the deep meditation of a monk, the contemplative prayer of a mystic, or the quiet candlelit reflection in a chapel, silence becomes a bridge between the human and the divine. It is through silence that many believe they can hear the whispers of the soul or feel the presence of something greater. This is not coincidental, it is deeply rooted in the human understanding that silence is a vessel for the sacred. It holds space for reverence, humility, and awe. In silence, we are not trying to control or understand the divine. We are simply open to experiencing it. Even outside of religious contexts, silence can take on sacred dimensions in everyday life. Think of the respectful quiet in a library, the solemn stillness of a memorial, or the emotional silence that follows a powerful performance. These moments are not just about being quiet. They are about honoring something meaningful, something that words cannot adequately capture. The shared silence in such settings communicates respect, empathy, and presence more eloquently than any speech ever could. In these instances, silence binds people together in a collective experience of truth, beauty, or sorrow. On a personal level, silent moments allow for deep introspection and reconnection. In silence, we can check in with ourselves, not just intellectually, but emotionally and spiritually. We can ask the questions that truly matter. Am I happy? What do I truly want? What am I grateful for? These questions require quiet to surface. They cannot be answered amidst noise and distraction. Sacred silence is a pause that gives space for the inner voice to be heard, for healing to begin, and for clarity to unfold. It is not about isolating ourselves from the world, but about becoming more in tune with our place within it. Thus, moments of silence, though often brief and unassuming, hold immense power. They offer refuge from the noise, both external and internal. They invite us to slow down, to listen deeply, and to be fully present. In a society that frequently overlooks the value of stillness, Reclaiming silence as sacred is a radical act of self-care and spiritual. It is in these sacred pauses that life speaks most clearly, not in shouts, but in whispers, revealing truths that can only be heard when we are quiet enough to listen. Silence has long been a companion to those on a journey of self-discovery and personal development. In the accents of noise, didn't dire, they heard thoughts from within. It gently pushes us to face our styles and statistician impose this digital data. This confrontation can be uncomfortable, but it is necessary. True personal growth begins when we dare to sit with ourselves in silence, to observe our thoughts without judgment, and to accept what we find without resistance. Many of the world's greatest thinkers, philosophers, and leaders have spoken about the importance of solitude and silence in their lives. Whether it was Mahatma Gandhi observing days of silence to reflect and renew his convictions, or Albert Einstein retreating into quiet contemplation to solve scientific mysteries, history shows that profound insight often arises in stillness. These figures did not seek silence as a way to escape the world. Rather, they used it as a means to understand it more deeply. Through silence, they were able to fine-tune their inner compass, think independently, and act with clarity and conviction. It is through such examples that we begin to see silence not as withdrawal, but as preparation. The process of personal growth involves introspection, self-questioning, and a re-evaluation of beliefs and behaviors. These are not tasks that can be rushed or forced in noisy environments. Silence provides the mental space needed for this introspection to unfold naturally. It allows us to hear the subtle stirrings of our conscience and consider the bigger questions in life. Who am I? What am I here to do? What does a meaningful life look like for me? Slowly, sincerely, and in ways that inspire inner change, life, unquote. Re-experiencing secret osmos, slowly, sincerely, unquote. Silence also enhances emotional resilience, a crucial component of personal growth. In a silent space, we are more likely to confront emotions that we usually suppress. Feelings of grief, disappointment, anger, or even joy that go unacknowledged in the rush of life are given room to surface. Processing these emotions in silence allows for genuine understanding and healing. When we confront our emotional truths, we become less reactive and more composed. We learn to respond rather than to lash out. In this way, silence becomes a powerful teacher in emotional maturity and self-control, both of which are pillars of a strong, grounded character. Furthermore, silence teaches patience and deepens discipline. Sitting in silence is not easy. especially for those new to the practice. The restless mind often rebels against stillness, demanding stimulation or distraction. But with time and consistency, silence teaches us to be patient with ourselves, with others, and with life itself. We learn to sit through discomfort, to wait for clarity, and to accept moments of stillness as valuable rather than empty. This discipline builds mental endurance, sharpens focus, and strengthens the willpower necessary for long-term personal development. Finally, silence nurtures a stronger relationship with the self. In noisy environments, our sense of identity is often shaped by others, by their opinions, expectations, and judgments. But in silence, we begin to detach from external validation and connect with our authentic selves. We learn to trust our inner voice, honor our unique path, and embrace our individuality without fear. This self-trust is essential for personal growth because it allows us to make choices aligned with our values rather than societal pressures. In silence, we find the courage to evolve, not into what the world wants us to be, but into who we truly are. In the digital age, silence has become one of the rarest commodities. Modern life, shaped by constant connectivity and relentless stimulation, has created an environment where noise is not only common, it is expected. We are surrounded by a continuous stream of sounds. Phones ringing, messages pinging, televisions playing, traffic blaring, and social media endlessly scrolling, with videos, voices, and flashing visuals. This backdrop of sound and sensory overload has become the norm, making silence seem foreign and even uncomfortable. In fact, many people now associate silence with awkwardness or inactivity, as though something must be wrong if nothing is happening or being said. Technology, while beneficial in countless ways, has accelerated this resistance to silence. Smartphones, streaming platforms, and social media have created a world where we are never alone with our thoughts, unless we intentionally choose to be. Whenever we feel a moment of stillness approaching, we instinctively reach for our devices to fill the void. Waiting rooms, elevators. We are conditioned to believe that productivity, entertainment, or communication must occupy every spare second. In such a climate, silence is perceived not as peaceful, but as unproductive or even wasteful. This resistance to silence also reveals a deeper discomfort with introspection. When we are constantly bombarded with external noise, we rarely have to face what is going on internally. The truth is, many people use noise, both literal and metaphorical, as a way to avoid confronting difficult emotions, unresolved issues, or uncomfortable truths about themselves. By staying distracted, we postpone the inner work that silence demands. But in doing so, we also miss out on the clarity, growth, and healing that comes from quiet reflection. Thus, the noise of modern life becomes not just a habit, but a shield, a barrier between who we are and who we have the potential to become. The workplace too reflects this aversion to silence. Open office plans, constant emails, and meetings scheduled back to back have created an atmosphere where silence is nearly impossible. Yet studies show that noise pollution in work environments reduces focus, increases stress, and hinders creativity. Ironically, the very systems designed to increase productivity often undermine it by denying people the silent space necessary for deep thinking and innovation. Silence is not the enemy of progress. It is a key ingredient. Great ideas do not emerge from constant chatter. They are born in moments of pause, of contemplation, and of quiet insight. Social dynamics further complicate our relationship with silence. In many cultures, silence in conversation is often seen as awkward or rude. People feel pressure to fill every pause with words, even if those words lack meaning. We are taught to respond quickly, to have opinions ready, to entertain or be entertained. As a result, the art of thoughtful silence has been lost. We speak not always because we have something to say, but because we feel we must. This constant verbalization diminishes the depth of our communication. True connection sometimes lies not in what is said, but in the quiet presence shared between individuals. Despite all these challenges, the human need for silence has not disappeared. It has merely been buried under layers of noise and distraction. Deep within us remains a longing for stillness, a desire to escape the constant buzz and hear ourselves think, feel, and be. Modern life may resist silence, but it cannot erase its value. In fact, the more we are surrounded by noise, the more crucial silence becomes. It is in direct opposition to the fast-paced, always-on culture that silence proves its worth. As a space of retreat, reflection, and restoration that modern life desperately needs. Silence, though often underestimated, carries with it a quiet kind of joy that cannot be replicated by external stimulation. This joy does not come from excitement, laughter, or celebration in the traditional sense. It is subtler, more grounded, and deeply nourishing. It is the contentment that arises from simply being present, with nothing to prove and no one to impress. In moments of silence, we discover a serenity that wraps around us gently, like a warm blanket. This calmness can bring more genuine joy than noise-filled moments of temporary pleasure. It is a joy that is not dependent on circumstances, but emerges from within. And once we experience it, we begin to seek it more deliberately. The healing nature of silence is equally profound. In a world where stress, anxiety, and emotional burnout are on the rise, silence offers a sanctuary for recovery. It slows down the nervous system, calms the racing mind, and creates space for the body and soul to restore themselves. Medical studies have shown that periods of silence can lower blood pressure, reduce cortisol levels, and improve sleep, offering physical benefits that rival those of medication or therapy. But beyond the physical, silence provides emotional healing. It gives us room to sit with our feelings, to understand our pain, and to process experiences that words may not be able to explain. In silence, the heart speaks. We often move so fast and keep ourselves so busy that we ignore our emotional needs. But silence allows us to feel, really feel, what's going on inside. Whether it's grief we haven't faced, joy we haven't embraced, or confusion we haven't sorted out, silence holds space for it all. Silence holds space for it all. And all of that is healing. It's a release, a recognition, and a relief. Silence doesn't judge, interrupt, or analyze. It just accepts. That acceptance alone is one of the most powerful forms of emotional healing available to us. Furthermore, silence has a unique ability to cleanse the mind. Much like a body that needs rest after physical exertion, the mind needs silence after processing endless input throughout the day. Constant exposure to media, conversation, and information drains our cognitive energy, leaving us mentally exhausted. Silence functions as a reset button. In silence, the mind is no longer forced to respond or react. It simply is. This mental stillness improves our capacity to focus, enhances memory, and sharpens problem-solving skills. It also helps us gain perspective, often revealing solutions to challenges that seemed insurmountable in the noise. Spiritual traditions across the world recognize silence not just as healing, but as sacred. From Buddhist meditation to Christian contemplative prayer, from Sufi whirling to Hindu ashram life, silence is used as a path to inner peace and divine connection. These practices demonstrate how silence can lead to transcendence, not escape from life, but immersion into its deepest truths. When the outer world is quiet, the inner world becomes more accessible. In that space, many people report feeling a profound sense of love, peace, and connection to something greater than themselves. This spiritual joy is one of the highest forms of healing. The cumulative effect of regularly engaging with silence is transformative. It changes how we experience the world and how we relate to ourselves. We begin to carry a quiet joy within us that is not shaken by chaos or conflict. We grow more grounded, more present, and more aware of what truly matters. Silence, in this sense, is both the journey and the destination. It is the place where we find not just rest but renewal, not just peace but power. And within its stillness, we begin to heal, not just from what has hurt us, but toward the person we are meant to become. In a world that constantly urges us to speak more, do more, and be more, silence invites us to simply be. Let us not fear silence, but honor it. Let us not rush to fill it, but make space for it. Because within its stillness lies a timeless power, the power to listen, to feel, to grow, and ultimately to find peace.